Thanks for joining us and welcome to Black Horizons. I'm your host, Chris Moore. On today's show, one of Pittsburgh's best-known television reporters is retiring, and he joins us today to talk about some thrilling moments from his career. And of course, there's our community calendar on the horizon. But first, on today's show, we're introducing a new segment called Above the Fold. I'll be joined on a regular basis by journalists from the New Pittsburgh Courier to discuss events past and present and their impact on our community. Today's guest is the publisher and editor of the New Pittsburgh Courier, Mr. Rod Doss. Rod, welcome to the program.
Oh,
How
Chris,
are you,
it's
sir?
always good to be here with you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
I'm really excited about this Above the Fold segment that we're starting here.
So am I.
And the Courier has really been innovative in its approach to news publishing and print publishing over the last couple of years. You started things that appeal to the youth group in your photographic segments,
Yes.
and you've got all sorts of young 40-year-olds and under that you're bringing along, and then there's your men and women of excellence. It's a brave new world out there for print, as a lot of print outlets are really suffering, isn't it?
Well, we've always had challenges, but the real concept is to be as innovative as you possibly can, as well as staying current with the times. You know, this is the digital age, and we do have a website. We also have a digital edition that we carry. But it's really about staying in touch with the community. That's why I like some of the new events that we're doing. They reach right into the heart of the community. They celebrate the people in the community and lift up their achievements, their accomplishments to a level of exposure for the total community.
And that's always been the secret of success of organizations like the New Pittsburgh Courier and WAMO too, that they were involved in the community from back in the days when it was known as WHOD.
Oh,
and that just happens to be our first Above the Fold as we talk about the state of black radio here, which you all have been covering at the Courier.
Yes, yes. Well, the one thing I can say about the history of black radio in Pittsburgh is it gave us our first community personalities. When you think about it, a lot of times people don't give that as much credence as it really should be deserved. But the reality is, when you look back at Mary Dee, Bill Powell, Sir Walter, all the personalities, they were community people. They were community personalities that made a dramatic impact on this community. When we look back at some of those celebrated photos, for example, there is the picture of Mary Dee that used to host her show right down on Center Avenue, and the crowd of people that used to come around just to watch her do that show was incredible. Every day she was there like that. But you have other personalities through time, Sly Jock, you know,
Well, I'll
John
tell you
Anthony.
what, instead of talking about them, let's take a look at some of the photos from the Courier archives
All
in our
right.
new segment we call Above the Fold. We'll take a look at some of these photographs and look at how they were involved. And here we have Mr. Davenport, along
yes.
with the former mayor, Caligari.
And Roger Fairfax, who was a former
right.
general manager. But you know, a lot of credit should be given to Ron Davenport for continuing a station, even though it abruptly left. But the fact of the matter is that station served this community extremely well. I mean, not just the personalities that were showcased throughout the community, but all the community events they participated in, the give-backs that they did, the sense of employment opportunities that they provided for a whole host of young people. Not to mention your urban journalism workshop,
Absolutely.
where they had young people coming into that studio and learning that trade.
We had young Mr. Davenport here when they announced that WAMO was going off the air some months ago, and I had the opportunity to publicly thank him, because what you just mentioned is something that I don't think a lot of people know, how WAMO helped young people get into that business, including training them through in cooperation with the Pittsburgh Black Media Federation.
Absolutely.
Let's look at some more photos and see what we've got from the Courier archives here. All right.
Who is
that? Who
that
is that?
Brother Matt.
Is that Brother Matt?
That's our young Brother Matt.
Boy, I almost don't recognize him. That's Brother Matt?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
And there's John Christian in the foreground.
And that is Bill Powell
In the middle.
in the center, and
Bernie Jones. On the left. I think people will remember Bernie Jones, but tell me about Bill Powell, first of all.
Bill Powell, they sometimes called him the Reverend Bill Powell.
The Reverend Bill Powell.
And he was active in the community. He was another strong personality. He was at a lot of community events throughout the area. He began with a station called WILY, which took place shortly after WHOD had its demise. And then it was changed over. He joined WAMO. But he was greatly involved in the community, and he hosted a lot of shows from on-site different places. They connected with their advertisers and did shows and publicity events right from stores. I think you may have a photo of one of the shots where there was a guy that won some tires or something like that. And he was there for that event. So.
All right. As you say, they were all involved in the community, so we'll just run through some of these photos and look at the rest of them, okay? All right. And now a lot of people are upset about WAMO going out, but they don't remember, and the Courier covered this, the sale of WHOD, and this cut line says it was a popular interracial radio station in Homestead, and the community was upset because the station was going off the air. So it's not the first time we've lost a WAMO, a Wiley, or WHOD, right?
No, that's not. That's very true. That station converted to, what was it, I believe, country western music, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, it was a big shock to a lot of the people in the community. At that time, they had Mary Dee, I'm trying to think, her brother,
Mal Good,
Hazel Garland, and Toki Shaw from the Pittsburgh Courier also did segments on that show.
And there was always this communal relationship between WAMO, the Courier, WQED, the Courier, as it continues even today, right?
Yeah, right.
All right, let's look at some of the other personalities that were out there. And this again goes back to WHOD. Many of the people, it didn't really reproduce well for television, but Mary Dee in the middle, Mal Good to our right as we view that, to her left, and all those other personalities. There's Toki down below, and so many others that were involved, right?
Right. Yes, that was quite an event, and you can tell by the size type of the headline, it really hit the community.
It was big news. So
big
wake
news.
up, WAMO going is not the first time that this has happened. And here's the photo you mentioned that talks about their involvement, because they were always involved. You can see the WAMO poster just above the tires.
Right.
And this man won a set of brand new tires on a WAMO giveaway.
One of the promotions that they did there, and of course that's Bill Powell to the left on that particular picture. Yeah. But they were greatly involved in the community. I think that's how they got their some of their advertising revenue in terms of being on-site promotions, doing on-site promotions and the like. So they were greatly involved, but they got tremendous turnout from the community when they went somewhere. So again, I think there's Porky Chadwick.
Porky Chadwick, he's a name with the WAMO microphone logo there that no one will ever forget here in Pittsburgh. Still alive and still chirping, Daddy on the radio.
Absolutely, quite something. He has a long history of involvement. There's HB, Hal Brown.
They called him HB.
HB.
He was smooth,
yes,
I understand.
He was very smooth. He's down in Florida right now enjoying his retirement, but he was quite something.
These were the personalities of the day, right?
Absolutely.
And you mentioned John Christian, also known as Sir Walter Raleigh, the gentle gent with the English accent, something like that?
Yes. And it was a long time before people actually realized that he wasn't British, because all they heard was his voice on the air.
The magic of radio and the imagination of the mind, right? All right, well, what is the Courier going to be covering in the future in terms of what black radio is going to look like in our city?
Well, as you know, there was recently the announcement by Eddie Edwards that he had purchased a station.
We're going to have him on the show next week.
Okay, and he's looking forward to purchasing an FM radio station along with the AM station. Also, there is another black radio station. And
Lauren Mann gets a little upset sometimes, right?
Yes, Lauren Mann is out there. He has his gospel station, and I think he is trying to take advantage of the void at this particular time. My understanding is that he has engaged the news personality Bev Smith on his station. So he's looking at the opportunity to move in a different direction, or at least fill in the void so that there is a little bit of community news speak or what have you. So,
well, Rod, we look forward to Above the Fold on future segments of Black Horizons and a new cooperative relationship with the new Pittsburgh Courier.
Well, thank you, Chris.
very much
Always
for being here
being
with us. And looking forward to seeing what else is in those archives, okay?
All right. Very Very good.
All right, stay tuned to Black Horizons and look to the Courier for the continuing story of black radio in Pittsburgh. Scratching your noggin about where to go and what to do? Then check out our community calendar on the horizon. If you have an event that you'd like to see listed, send it to On the Horizon, care of WQED Pittsburgh, 4802 5th Avenue, Pittsburgh, PA 15213. Our next guest has covered it all, from championship athletes to crime reporting to blizzards and storms. Here he is interviewing the great one, Roberto Clemente.
Channel 4's Dee Thompson reports.
For 18 years, Roberto Clemente thrilled Pittsburgh fans with his superb baseball talents. Many experts called him the most complete player in baseball history. You name it, he could do it. Even though he was 38, he was in better condition than a young man of 21. His basket catches and rifle arm made him one of the most feared outfielders in the game. He was Golden Glove winner the past 12 years. He led the National League in hitting 4 years. Despite his feats, Roberto didn't become internationally known until the 1971 World Series, when he got a hit in every game. His power hitting and fielding impressed sports writers and made him the darling of Pittsburgh.
And in the clutch, the great one, Roberto, led the way, all the way to the top.
Proud of my teammates. We went through lots of problems all year, and we was in lots of tough spots and different times during the years, and but we come out as a winner, so which is make everybody the Pittsburgh Pirate member very proud of.
Roberto had tremendous self-discipline. He loved baseball and believed every man should be in peak condition during his playing years. He had a lifetime batting average of .318. He led all active players in singles and triples. He became a legend this year when he finally reached the 3,000 hit plateau. It came on a Saturday afternoon in September. Thousands had been flocking to Three Rivers Stadium to see the hit. When it finally came, even Roberto was happy it came in Pittsburgh.
Well, I wasn't going to get it any place else. It's no matter. I know in my mind I wasn't going to get it. If I was going to get it, I was going to get it in Pittsburgh, because I said before, Pittsburgh is like my home, and the fans in Pittsburgh, I tell you, it's something that this is the best thing ever happened to me, to have the Puerto Rican people on one side.
After 4 decades, Dee Thompson has decided to turn in his microphone. However, he's been gracious enough to join us today and regale us with his adventures. Welcome to Black Horizons, Dee Thompson. Let me shake your hand, man.
Chris, it's great to be here.
That is classic footage, and I understand on that 3,000 hit, you actually had to talk the station into going down there that day.
The fantastic career he had, the fantastic World Series that he had, and I'm going, we have to go to the game today. I mean, how can we not go? Had to convince him to go, and it ends up being historic footage. And the interview that I had there, the last interview that he did before he went to Nicaragua, I mean, it was a highlight of my career almost at the beginning.
we have to point out that was you with the sideburns there, right?
It definitely was.
How did your career begin, sir? You really a print journalist to start.
Believe it or not, I'm from Beaver County, and I started at 16 years old covering Joe Namath. He was in high school, same time I was. He was picked for a Junior Legion All-Star game. I had played some sports, in junior high and high school, but I wasn't nearly the athlete he was. But he was such a good athlete, the newspaper said, I wanted to go to the All-Star game, and he was going. I couldn't go, so I said, how can I go? My next-door neighbor was a newspaper reporter. He said, why don't you go cover the game? So I said, what do I do? He says, you go get the information, come back, I'll show you how to write it. And that's how my career started, covering Joe Namath. And after that, Joe went on to become Broadway Joe, went to Alabama, Broadway Joe. Everybody knows about him predicting the Super Bowl. The newspaper sent me to cover him. I saw him in New York, all that electronic media. I said, I should go from the print media to electronic media.
And how did you make that jump?
Well, really what happened after I did that, I came back, I went to a park game one weekend. There was a photographer from Channel 4. I said, how do you get into the electronic media? I said, I've had some newspaper experience. I was in New York covering Joe Namath and got all these pictures. He says, well, why don't you bring them up to the station? So I went up there on a Friday. They liked what they saw. They said, you can start Monday if you can.
All right, we're going to look at another clip now, providing the on-the-scene coverage, often put Dee in the forefront of some of the biggest stories. Here's Dee at the very beginning of what would become one of Pittsburgh's most divisive tragedies, the death of Johnny Gammage.
Dee Thompson joins us now live from East Liberty with video of the incident that you will only see on 11. Dee?
Good morning, Della. Well, actually, good afternoon. We've been on this story for quite a while. Police are still piecing together the details, but I have learned that the car was owned by Pittsburgh Steelers defensive end Ray Seals, and he did lend the car to his 31-year-old cousin. The chase in the black Jaguar with Florida plates started about 2 a.m. in Brentwood when police noticed the erratic driver traveling suspiciously through the borough. Pittsburgh Police Commander Ron Freeman says the chase involved police from several communities.
There was an attempt to stop an erratic driver in Brentwood by the Brentwood police. The driver refused to stop. There was a low-speed pursuit into Pittsburgh, Route 51, Sawmill Run Boulevard. The car was eventually stopped. The driver became combative and abusive with the police. He was subdued at the scene. Once he was handcuffed, he went into cardiac arrest.
Police are reluctant to discuss the details of the scuffle until they interview others involved, but we have learned there may have been drugs involved. Brentwood medics rushed the 31-year-old black male to Mercy Hospital, where he was pronounced dead a short time later. After questioning, one of the police officers also required medical assistance. Police are withholding the name of Seals' cousin until next of kin are notified. Now, Della, there's still a lot of questions to be answered here, like why did Seals' cousin become combative? How and why did he die so quickly? I think we'll get some of these answers at a coroner's inquest. Back to you.
Dee, in answer to this question, Seals' cousin had permission to drive that car?
We've talked with Steeler personnel about that, and they tell us that his
Up and through the court case, right?
I definitely did. And what amazed me about that case is that they could have called me to testify at the trial, but they didn't. They called a photographer, Pat O'Keefe, who I work with, and they asked him in the case, why did you show all that footage? Why did you show, the police officers involved in all of that? And he said, because Dee Thompson told me to. So we had that footage.
Yeah, and you've had a long relationship with Pat as your photographer, right?
Yeah, it definitely has. He has worked, almost 20 years with me, covering all kinds of things, cold weather in the morning, fires, shootings, the Gammage case, a lot of cases like that.
All that sort of stuff. What has been the highlight? Because you've been allowed to travel. You put 2 daughters through college. You're a grandfather now. What's been the highlight of all this? Man?
There are a lot of them. Clemente was a highlight. The fact that while I covered the Steelers for 12 years, I was able to go to 6 Super Bowls, 4 of them in the 70s when the Steelers were making their runs. And then when Dan Marino and Joe Montana, who are from this area, played in the Super Bowl out in California, they sent me out to cover that.
People don't remember you started as a sports reporter. You even started a concept that went nationwide in the local show, The Fifth Quarter, right?
Yeah, after the Super Bowls, since there were 4 quarters in the game, I said, why don't we come up with this idea of doing a post-game called Fifth Quarter?
That was your idea?
Yes, it was. My idea started out, next thing you know, NFL teams are calling me from all over the country going, can we copy that format? How are you doing it?
You should have copyrighted that, brother.
I should have. But it led to the pre- and post-game shows that we see from the NFL now.
Wow, that's amazing. What a history. And how many years has it been?
For me, it's 35 years at Channel 11. Prior to that, I worked at Channel 4 for 8 years, and prior to that, for 8 years in the newspaper business.
So that has to make you one of the first to ever be in print or broadcast as a black person in this town, right?
Actually, I went to an after convention once, and I talked to all the people there, and I said, you know, how many people really started out, African Americans, in this business going back through the years? I think when I was 16 years old, working in mainstream media, I was one of maybe a handful of people who are African Americans who are working in the business.
People don't know that you also were one of the founders of the Pittsburgh Black Media Federation, which now trains people to continue in your legacy.
Yeah, when we started out doing Black Chronicle on Channel 4, I said we should do something, you know, to get people, educate kids, get them into the business, because there were very few of us in the business at the time. So we started the Black Media Federation.
I only have one bit of one-upmanship for you, and that's that Black Horizons was first, okay?
That's true, but we did have Black Chronicle back then.
No doubt. You and Kathy Milton, and we saw a couple of the other anchors that people know well here in Pittsburgh, too, introducing some of your work.
That's right. And
Dela Cruz.
Yeah, Dela Cruz, obviously. And then even some of the people, when I worked at Channel 4, I ran across a picture the other day. There was Paul Long, Don Cannon, Myron Cope, Bill Hillgrove, and myself, all in the picture back in those days.
Well, that's the who's who. All right, this final clip shows Dee in two situations in which he always excelled: the combination of danger and bad weather.
Every ambulance in the city had to be called to transport the injured to area hospitals.
We have in excess of 40 injuries. A couple of those are extremely critical. There's another group in between that are critical, and then there's some people just with like some fractured noses and the like.
The need for emergency help was so severe, a county disaster plan was put in effect. EMS units from the entire county are helping with the rescue. Mayor Murphy deeply appreciated the cooperation.
They were here within minutes. I think if we have lessened the number of fatalities, it will be because of the kind of response that they had and the cooperation throughout the region. It's wonderful to know that we have that level of professional services here.
This had to be one of the worst accidents you could possibly have in Pittsburgh. The latest details we get now, there's one fatality, 53 people injured, at least a dozen critically. They're withholding the name of at least the one fatality until they notify the next of kin. So when we get that information, we'll let you know in a later report. Back to you.
Dee, I understand there was a website that was commissioned somewhere where why is Dee Thompson freezing? Because you were always out in the cold environment like that.
Yeah, they put a Facebook up, and I didn't even realize it. And people were telling me, you know, they have this thing about you freezing, and people are commenting and seeing me out there freezing. And then the guys at the local radio stations, too, they used to make fun of me out there. There's Dee out in the cold again. There's Dee covering a murder and shooting again. But it turned out it really worked in my favor, because people were always talking about, why are you out there doing that? And they had a lot of fun with it too.
Did it ever get old? Because I talked to a lot of people in the news business who get really weary. I remember one time as I go into Channel 11, you would always be leaving. You were telling me you could predict what time the murder and mayhem would begin. Did it ever get old covering that kind of stuff, that inhumanity, man-on-man inhumanity?
First of all, I always knew when the bars would close at 2, at 2:30, you knew something was going to happen. Unfortunately, people get drunk and things like that do happen. But I never really had a problem covering any of those things. You almost get the attitude of a policeman. You feel like they're just numbers and things like that happening. If I had let it affect me, you know, I covered maybe 50 shootings a year over 20-some years. That's a lot of homicides. Yeah. So if you really had to think about that, it could be tough on your mind. I tried not to. I could sleep at night.
One of the greatest things about your career is that you were able to put 2 daughters through college, and now you're a grandfather. I guess you're relishing that role now.
Yeah, I did. I worked, a lot of people know I worked 2 jobs, trying to put them through college. It was quite a challenge. And my daughter, Tara, she had a baby, Bree Jasmine, 2 months ago, so that's a big thrill for me. And believe me, just having something like that is great.
I thought we had a picture of that here that we could put up, because we do. And there you are, beaming your daughter and your grandchild, and you look like a proud grandpa there, buddy.
Very much so. I'm very proud of Tara, too, because I think I told you she went on to do interpretive sign language interpretation.
And has big contracts all around the nation doing that now.
Yes, very much so.
Well, as you look back on this, is there anything that you would tell the young people who want to do what you and I do now?
Well, I tell you what, it's challenging. It was never boring. When you go to work every day, you really enjoy it. I enjoyed it. There's no question about that. You never know what you're going to do. but you must have a thick skin. You've got to be dedicated, and if you can do that, you can make it in this business.
Well, with your retirement, that must leave me as the Dean of Black Broadcasting, because I think that title usually means the oldest, but you're certainly somebody whose shoulders I stand on, and I really appreciate what you've done for everybody who works in media in this town, black or white.
Chris, I appreciate that. I really want to thank everybody who's been so good to me through the years, and it's been great, believe me.
Dee Thompson, congratulations on your retirement. Enjoy it, man.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that'll just about do it for this episode of Black Horizons. We thank you and our guests for joining us. We thank you both so much. I'm Chris Moore, and from all of us here at Black Horizons, have a great week. Bye-bye.